On August 29, 1979, Hurricane David, one of the early climate change storms, slammed into Waitakubuli, flattening 70% of the housing stock, mowing down forests, and claiming more than 30 lives in what would be the opening of a new era of ever more destructive storms. Mabrika, Mabrika, welcome. Welcome to Dominica, or as my Kalinago ancestors called it, Waitakubuli, meaning tall is her body. Yet, even her towering height can hardly stand up to what my ancestors called hurricane. Dominica, also known as the nature island of the Caribbean, is a small island state among the 4 Windward Islands in the Eastern Caribbean. Dominica is pierced by 8 active volcanoes, the only boiling lake in the Western Hemisphere, and is home to the last remaining Carib Indians in the Caribbean, known as the Kalinagos. Making up only 750 square kilometers, the island's economy is hinged largely on agriculture and tourism to sustain its population of nearly 70,000 people. But for all its beauty, the landscape of Dominica, once revered as the land of many rivers, is changing. In fact, the biodiversity of the island is under threat, mostly as a result of deforestation, encroachment, natural disasters, and the impact of climate change. We may be an island, but we are not alone. Climate change is nothing short of a global crisis. In fact, climate change is now recognized as the most important environmental problem facing the globe.
This region is home to half the world's population. Your economies are growing fast. Greenhouse gas emissions are rising. We must find a way to de-link the two. This is why I'm calling for a global Green New Deal to spread clean energy technologies. It can also create jobs and help us reverse this economic downturn. We must also reverse environmental degradation.
Leaders in various parts of the world have taken drastic steps to bring attention to the grave effects that climate change has had on their countries. One such leader is the President of the Maldives, Mohamed Nasheed.
We are actually trying to send our message, let the world know what is happening and what will happen to the Maldives if climate change is not checked. This is a challenging situation, and we want to see that everyone else is also occupied as much as we are, and would like to see that people actually do something about it.
According to a policy document on climate change from the Caribbean Community Climate Change Center, global climate change is the most serious risk to sustainable development facing the member states of the Caribbean. And rising sea levels, an escalation in the number of tropical storms and hurricanes, and disruptions in rainfall and freshwater supply threaten the very existence of countries within the Caribbean community.
The greatest challenge one had basically was to engage these different countries with different interests. Of course, there's some common interests in a conversation to define action to deal with climate change in the period 2011 to 2021. It's a 10-year plan we're addressing.
As for Dominica, it makes sense that the country would fight to preserve not only its existence, but also its identity as the nature island of the Caribbean.
We have now developed this document, a strategy to serve as a platform. It's a platform document on which we will build a number of pillars. Those pillars, they're major pillars, they're sectoral pillars, they're also cross-cutting pillars. And what we have done is to anchor that document within the sustainable development paradigm. As you know, for many years, in this country we have promoted the concept of the nature island of the Caribbean. We have spoken a lot about organic Dominica and organic agriculture. We've spoken a lot about our ecotourism ethos And so basically what we have been articulating over the years is a form of sustainable development pathway that we wish to an attempt to follow over a period of time. So what this document does is in a way to bring all those together, to capture all our thoughts, all our actions, and all our processes that we've been articulating and undertaking in a sort of coherent, very integrated way to lead us into 2020 along the path of a green economy.
Dominica has been fighting to preserve its seacoasts and rainforests from as far back as the 1960s, and that fight continues today.
The aim of the PPCR is to pilot and demonstrate ways in which climate risk and resilience may be integrated into core development planning and implementation. The PPCR therefore provides incentives for scaled-up action and initiate transformational change. This process is divided into two phases. In phase 1, a strategic program for climate resilience (SPCR) and related investment plans are to be developed. And in phase 2, the specific programs identified in the SPCR will be implemented. It has been built upon work done over the past 12 years that include Dominica's climate change adaptation policy, the national capacity self-assessment, initial national communication, the second national communication, development plans, poverty reduction strategies, Millennium Development Goals, and the all-important Growth and Social Protection Strategy, GSPS. Thus, the strategy being presented here today is a hybrid of various major government policy documents, and it outlines how Dominica intends to fight climate change by pursuing a low-carbon climate resilient development strategy, by developing and harnessing our forest reserves, our abundant freshwater resources, our geothermal potential, as well as our solar and wind energy resources, to produce the electrical energy that requires for local consumption and export.
Gloria Shillenford, Dominica's Minister for Community Development, knows that the effects of climate change may damage public infrastructure and private lives, especially of the poor.
There were other communities around the island which also were affected at that time, mainly the Carib territory. Huge landslides, about 8 of them, and other communities like Petit Soufrier, Saint-Sauvé. As a matter of fact, we just visited as a cabinet those places just to give some hope to the people that are there. And the government just had to spend quite a sum of money helping to get families back on track. So definitely their livelihood was affected, infrastructure, their homes that probably some of them just built, homes that the government helped to build and has to do the same thing over again. And so we see climate change really affecting all communities.
Dominica's Prime Minister Roosevelt Skerrit has made it clear that his government is committed to implementation of the Pilot Program on Climate Resilience, PPCR, and its Strategic Program on Climate Resilience, SPCR, because the initiative will allow Dominica to respond more effectively to climate change. The Dominica leader says his country cannot afford to do otherwise.
In my country, Dominica, the Commonwealth of Dominica, we're now constructing sea defenses and river defenses throughout the country, and you can appreciate the tremendous cost of that capital investment. You have more frequency in terms of hurricanes, unduly prolonged dry spells, which affects agriculture, and unduly long spells of rain. And we have seen what used to be what we call the rainy season now becomes a dry season, and what used to be the dry season is now the rainy season. And all of these things have an impact on your economy. And if you're unable as a nation, as a group of nations, to provide for your people, then you will have a serious crisis on your hand.
This is part of what previous generations have handed down to today's youth. But the youth are already finding ways to ensure that their own legacy will be a more sustainable way of life.
So I think we realize that in order to preserve the environment for our future generation, we need to work with the young persons. And so the ministry is working with young persons to develop that kind of, to give them that kind of information, to develop that greater awareness of the environment and how we can preserve our environment to prevent or to minimize the amount of global warming that's taking place. So they give the young persons at the school enough information so that they can effect some positive change in the way they look towards those kinds of things, our environment. And so these are some of the small things that they do within the youth department with the young persons so that the young persons can develop that greater appreciation of the environment, how they can conserve or preserve our environment so that we can really minimize that global warming, because we need to understand it can have some definite, some devastating effect on all of us, on our food, on the way we live, our own health, you know, all of those kinds of things. And we know we need to work with them so that, because they are the best persons to effect the change.